Well, hello and welcome to this episode. I want to start with a question. Do you ever make assumptions in your relationships about what the other people should or shouldn't know about you? Do you assume that you're on the same page, even when you might not be? That is exactly what I'm talking about in this episode, where I'm going to be breaking down the difference between silent agreements that we have in our relationships and clean agreements, meaning agreements that are expressed where we actually talk about the thing. So, if you are new to this channel, I just want to say thank you. I'm so happy you're here. I want to encourage you to introduce yourself and say hello below. Make sure that you subscribe, make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss a thing. And if you don't know me, I'm Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and the author of Boundary Boss, which you can buy at boundarybossbook.com. And don't forget to get your bonuses there. Many of you already bought the book, and if you bought it on Amazon, that's great, that's fine. But take that little receipt and go to boundarybossbook.com. You can still get some beautiful boundary bonuses, and I want you to have all of them. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell. All right, that's it. Moving on. Okay, so what are silent agreements? Let's just talk about this. These are the unspoken agreements and rules that we have in our relationships, right? We learn this trust me, we learned this growing up. We're going to get to that. And I've created a little guide for you. You just download the guide. You're going to answer a bunch of questions so you can understand the silent agreements that you never vocally agreed to, but all families have them. So in my family of origin, there was a silent agreement that we wouldn't talk about anything too messy and that nobody really was allowed to get mad. We all knew it. You didn't need to get like a memo from someone. You know what your silent agreements are. Many of my clients, the silent agreement in their home, if it's a home with addiction, is that no one talks about what happened last night. So if there was a big brawl, someone was falling down drunk, someone woke up and they were like sitting in the car, somebody found them, no conversation about that. Those are silent agreements. And when you're a child, you're not agreeing to those things. You are born into a situation, but you know what they are. We have a tendency to do this in our adult relationships as well, which really does create disordered emotional boundaries, right? And miscommunication. We don't know what's going on with people because we're making a lot of assumptions about them, or we're anticipating their reaction to something. And that is why we continue to participate in silent agreements. So in this episode, I want you to start to really think about that. And I'm going to give you a couple of questions now. There'll be more on your little cheat sheet. What assumptions do you make in your life right now? So when you really want something from someone, you want someone to do something for you, do you think that they should just intuit that, right? They should already know this because to you it's obvious. Because that's like a silent agreement or an assumption that we make. But when we really look at it, what does it spare us from doing? It spares us from having to ask the person to do it. So we're all pissy that they're not reading our minds, but they can't, right? Or do you ever allow insensitive comments to sort of pass by and sort of tell yourself, the other person didn't mean it, type of a thing? And I'm not talking about if you're dealing with someone who is psychologically unwell, right? If you are dealing with someone with narcissistic personality disorder, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you're just dealing with a group of people and someone says something that's really rude, but you decide you're not going to say anything because you don't want to deal with it, And it makes it an agreement sort of because the assumption is that they didn't mean the thing that they said. And then another thing is, and I was talking about this in a vlog that I did not that long ago, about projection, where we will do something that's called complementary projection, where this is the question, and you're going to answer it. Do you assume that if you make a big fuss over your friend's birthday, like it's a big deal to you, that when yours rolls around, they will do the same for you? Like, is that your expectation? And if it may be, you may be doing that complementary projecting thing, which is to say, having the assumption that other people think like we do, sort of value the same things that we do. And again, it requires us to not have a conversation. And that's why silent agreements can be so dangerous, because we end up hurt, upset, misunderstood, feeling marginalized, unimportant. Do you ever think, I shouldn't have to tell her that, or he should know that by now, whatever the thing is? So this is where you're going to start to think about your own life, and I want you to make a list. And I'm giving you the instructions in your guide, so don't worry. But you're going to make a list of the relationships. And right now, while you're listening, while you're watching, think about what relationships in your life do you find that you have silent agreements, either to not talk about something that's upsetting or some behavior that you don't like that's not working out, but it's almost like you both are in agreement that you're not going to talk about it. But you may find yourself acting it out. Because what happens if we have a lot of silent agreements in our life? The feelings we have, if they're agreements that we really don't want to agree to, but we're too afraid to talk about, what ends up happening? Well, we're frustrated, we're angry, and you don't think that those emotions go away simply because they are inconvenient, right? You know enough about mental health and emotions and what we can and can't control as human beings, that anger, that feeling of hurt, whatever it is that you're experiencing, that is not going away. You are going to have to express it in some way. So if you don't express it directly with clean and clear and concise agreements, which we're going to get to next, what happens? You will passively aggressively express it. You will slam a door. You will take a way longer time to text that friend back because you kind of want her to know that you're pissed, but you don't want to have to say that you're pissed. And when it is important relationships, this can really be damaging because then we have both people acting out their unexpressed feelings. So it gets very confusing, and of course this is terrible for boundaries. It is confusing enough to try to create healthy boundaries. When we are talking in subtext and meta messages, and behavior, right? Because really, I've said this for so many years, but it's the truth, that when it comes to our feelings, we can only talk them out or act them out. That's it. Those are our only two options. So when we have silent agreements, when we make assumptions, there is such an increased chance that you're going to be misunderstood, that your needs are not going to be met, that you are not going to feel seen in your relationship. And this is whether it's a work relationship, friendship, love relationship, it doesn't matter, because the most important thing is that we need to get clear about the agreements in our life. And the last thing about understanding and sort of discovering why you might lean towards silent agreements rather than clean agreements is, just like your boundary blueprint and your love blueprint, this silent agreements, and you've seen this behavior somewhere if you do this a lot. So there's going to be something. I'm going to give you a couple of questions that you can answer about how much was talked about in your family of origin. Where you, like me, came from a family where there was only certain things allowed to be discussed. Perhaps you had some emotions that were forbidden emotions in your family of origin when you were growing up. Or maybe most people are more just like my experience, where it's a family that anger was just not okay. But how complicated that makes talking true and drawing boundaries in adulthood if you were never allowed to express anger, if it was considered bad. So I'll give you a couple of questions where you can identify if there were any forbidden emotions in your family of origin, because that absolutely drives these types of silent agreements. And if there was a lot of silent agreements in your family of origin and what they were, because this is all information that will be so helpful for you to understand. So let's just, on the flip side, quickly, I'm going to go over clean agreements. What are they? They're transparent. They are clear. And if it has to do with anything that has to do with business or lending someone money, which of course I do not recommend to ever do to anyone, really. But if you do, it all must be written out. If anything is official business, you must have written binding agreements. That is a clean agreement. Because if not, you are not protecting your relationships, especially if you're going into business with family, with friends. We need clean, clear agreements. Every time we make an assumption, whether it's about who's paying for what, whether it's about a weekend that you're going away, it could be as simple as going away with your pals and you have the idea that you're going to leave at 6 a.m. and it's going to be amazing, going to get a full day in, and your friend has the idea you're going to leave after work on Friday. And if you don't talk about that until like the last minute, you're going to feel disappointed. They're going to feel frustrated. And of course, if they can't leave work, you're going to leave after work. But it's something that if from the beginning you ask the right questions, you get to the right agreements, you set everyone in your life up to succeed instead of setting them up to fail, which is what silent agreements are. It's also a way that we abandon ourselves, for sure, where we make excuses to a degree for other people's behavior. But also, if you're an empath, silent agreements are so real. They're so real anyway. But being an empath or a highly sensitive person, we know what the other person wants. And a lot of times we have more silent agreements, or we are emotionally pressured within ourselves to acquiesce, to give in, to do it the way the other person wants to do it, because we are so hypersensitive to the feeling states of others. So it is especially important if you identify as a highly sensitive person or an empath that you get really, really clear about where you are participating in silent agreements that are not in your best interest and that are not in the best interest for your relationships, your friendships, your career, because there are things that you can do, which is identify them and then talk about them and then get clear up front. And it is such a relief to just identify where you're doing it. And don't worry, as everything that I teach you, it's going to be one small step at a time. That's it. You don't have to change everything. Awareness is always the first step. We move into more self-knowledge, which is what this little guide is for you. And then you can decide one small change at a time. Right? You don't have to confront everyone at once, because this is also a way that we keep ourselves not doing anything, is that we get overwhelmed, we get afraid, we're like, oh my God, I can't do any of that. You don't have to do anything. I just want to teach you something and help you raise your awareness so that at least if you are participating in this, you understand why you're feeling the way that you are. And that I hope that I can encourage you to slowly but surely change your silent agreements to clean agreements, because they're without a doubt agreements with the best and healthiest boundaries where there's almost no chance for being misunderstood. We're all on the same page when we have a clean and transparent agreement. Okay, if you like this episode, I hope that you did, and you're listening to it, please review us. Drop us a review on the podcast right on iTunes. If you are watching this, drop me comments and really share this in your life. If this added any value to you, Share it on your social media. You know that I love to repost on your IG stories. And I just super appreciate you spending time with me today. Just like I do any episode that you listen to, it just lights me up. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. And as always, take care of you.